Hey party people. Today I'm going to go over a bunch of cutting and mounting tips and tricks and tools to help you make your design projects and portfolio look way more professional. Because nothing kills the look of your beautiful fabric story like having them be all crooked, fraying swatches that are all slightly different sizes. Let's go over some tools first. Number one, I have 3 pairs of scissors here, which is a laugh because I actually own like 12, 13 pairs of scissors, all for different purposes. These are regular paper scissors. They're like my multi-purpose scissors. They do all the grunt work. These are fabric only scissors. Okay, these are not my giant fabric scissors that I use to actually cut clothing, but this is for like little detail work, clipping threads when I can't find my thread trimmers, again, cutting yarns, like smaller projects where I don't want to use my big heavy duty shears. But these only ever cut fabric or yarn or thread, never paper. Paper dulls scissors super fast, and so you want to keep these nice and sharp for fabric work. These are pinking shears. Pinking shears are the ones that give you this zigzag edge. And again, these are for fabric only. I don't have any use for pinking paper, so I don't have any of those. This is a cutting mat. It's one of those healing cutting mats with the measurements on it. I don't use this all the time. If you watched my studio tour video, then you know that I always cover my cutting table, my big work table, with several sheets of cheap illustration board, and I just cut and draw and test and just run those illustration boards ragged until they're like falling apart, and then I recycle those and buy another set of illustration boards. It protects my table, and you know, most of my projects are bigger than this. These mats are kind of expensive and I can't paint on them. I'll sit there grabbing markers for a project and I'll like test right on the illustration board and stuff like that. Anyway, that's how I like to do things. This is just a random scrap of gray linen. This is how I cut fabric swatches for professional presentation, okay? Take the fabric and I iron it. Look how nice and smooth that is. Okay, I iron it and then take the back side of the fabric. This is just regular old tape, translucent, okay, single-sided. And let's say you want a swatch that is 2 inches by 2 inches, right? So here's 2 inches. Here's 2 inches. That's approximate, right? So I'm gonna... And try to get it along the selvage. Like, it doesn't have to be exactly precise like when you are cutting your actual patterns, but it helps the appearance of the fabric if you have it along the grain on your board, especially if you have a real specific texture. I'm doing it so that the 2 inches are in the middle of this tape. See that? Because we're gonna mark the tape. I'm gonna take my clear ruler. So my 2-inch square is gonna fit nicely inside the tape. If it doesn't, then you need to remove your tape. I prefer using a ballpoint pen over like a gel pen or a fine liner because I'm always paranoid that it's gonna smear. This will smear a little way less. Just give it a second to dry. So at this point, you cut this out, and you can cut it with a straight scissor, and you'll have a nice square, and the edges won't fray because the tape is there, but you're not gonna, of course, see it here. If you have sheer fabric, you may want to peel up the tape. Or if you can get the tape looking particularly good and even, like that's crooked, then you can keep it. But that's kind of your judgment call on how good you taped and how sheer the fabric is and how much the tape shows through and stuff like that. If you are using pinking shears, what I like to do is I like to make sure that the outside of the zigzag hits my pen line exactly. Okay, so that every single swatch that I pink will be the same exact size. See how I'm lining it up, the outside edge to the ink? And this is also good to get rid of the ink, so you don't have the pen ink anymore on the back of your swatch to smear and stain stuff. I'm definitely someone who likes to work slowly and just do things the one time. So here's my nice pinked little swatch ready to go on my board. Now, when I'm putting stuff on my paper board, I just use normal old double stick tape. This stuff is pretty freaking sticky, and so it'll do you just fine. It's nice and flat, okay? Because when you do this, I mean, I guess you could use this as a pinch, but if you use this, you have to kind of like, it wants to bounce back up. It doesn't want to lie flat, and you'll get a divot. Like you can kind of see it raised when it's on paper, whereas this lays a lot nicer, flatter, smoother. Something small like this, I would tape up the whole thing, but if you're gonna do big swatch so that people can feel it, what I see often and what I like looking at is I like to have one fabric board where the swatches are big enough where I can kind of maybe take the fabric board out of the sleeve and feel the fabric. So if that's the case, then I would, of course, nicely cut a giant square and then just double stick tape the top edge so the bottom part is loose and I can feel the fabric. And then when you have like little color chips later on, then you can just make the little swatches and format your pages. So when you are mounting all your fabrics onto your design, you want to have a consistent formula. There are a lot of ways you can format portfolio pages, and let me know if you want me to do a video on your various portfolio format methods for design projects. But for now, let's pretend that you're doing a bunch of pages where, let's say you have a figure here and you have a figure here. You know, let's say this is with jacket and this is without. And then let's say this one is a back view or a side view, depending on the design. You have your color chips up here. Obviously, they would all be the same size for your fabrics. And then you would have your flats in this space. So let's say this is your design page. And what I would do is I would use something like this, formatted with the exact proportions for your final. Okay, if your page is 14 by 17, get a 14 by 17 piece of paper. Figure out, your figures. Lay out your figures with a little bit of space so that when they're wearing clothes, they're not overlapping too much. Figure out how much space you need for flats, how big these are gonna be. And then when you are formatting all your stuff, I would take this, your beautiful finished formatted template, I would take it to a light box, slide it behind my final paper, and I would take my swatches and I would line them up perfectly with the template that I've created so that every single one of these design pages, everything is reading the same, okay? Because when people are looking at a bunch of these design pages and they're looking at your book, They don't want to start looking around for your stuff, because this kind of page is an information page, and it should be really easy to read. Okay, this kind of formatting, this is not where you let your artistic freedom fly. That's for your mood board. That's for your actual designs. Okay, maybe that's for your full figure lineup. But for this is like, this is what the designs are. This is what, you know, where the buttonholes are. This is the color of lining. You know, this is a very informational page, and so it should be very clear cut and easy to read. And so the format should be the same for every single one of these info pages. And so when you use a template like this, and you just use your light box or a sunny window, as we mentioned in a previous video, you line up your swatches using your template, and it'll be perfect every single time without having to remeasure, you know, inch from the top, you know, half an inch apart from each other, blah, blah, blah. You have two options. You can do one where the lines are just inside, so you know exactly where to put your swatch. Or you could do something where, and it fits exactly inside, but you have like a nice frame around your swatch. Okay? But either way, make sure everything is really uniform. When you have knits, and let's say you don't know how to knit, but you're designing a knit. I've totally been there, by the way. You could take your yarn, ta-da, okay? So you don't have to knit a bunch of swatches, teeny tiny little swatches to indicate the yarn, okay? You can make a little, and make sure that you have enough yarn there so that people can get an idea for the color. Because if you just put this there, it's kind of weak. It doesn't have the same impact, okay? Make sure you're creating a proper little swatch. When I cut paper, I like using two different rulers. I like to measure what I'm cutting with a clear graph ruler. And when I'm actually doing the cutting, I like to use a metal ruler so that I can take my blade and just really butt up against it, especially when you're cutting thicker boards and you're like working against this weak ass plastic. You can very easily cut into it. Okay, so you definitely want a metal edge like this for cutting. The back has cork. I've also seen rulers with like a black spongy material that is also very grippy. Those are good too. But look, you just put this down. There's no glue or anything, and it does not move. It does not move, and that's what you want when you are holding a blade in your hand very strongly. This, I mean, I don't even have to try that hard, and we're just slipping and sliding all over the place. However, this, because it has all the little square markings and everything, is just easier to get nice square measurements. I bought this ruler a while back. This is a clear plastic ruler with a metal edge, and I thought, ha, 2 for the price of 1. And I thought it would be a great alternative. However, I actually do not like this ruler at all because it doesn't move, which is nice. But the thing is, I'm a stickler for exactness. And you see how the thickness of the metal, it creates like a tiny triangle with how raised this is, and it just makes my measurements like 1/32 of an inch off, and it makes me crazy. Just, I don't like that. It's just not as easy to handle as the 2 rulers. And so, and then I can't really use this one the same way I can this one because I'm losing a little over 1/4 of an inch and it doesn't move as smoothly as this one. That's just my opinion. My opinion is these 2 and you're good to go. Let's talk about knives, right? So we have, this is your kind of your standard X-Acto with the tiny point, and you kind of twist it and pull the blade out, put the blade in again and twist. And sometimes when you're cutting a lot at once and you're using this a lot, this can kind of loosen up a bit. So just make sure, like after every few cuts, you're just kind of retightening that. I like this one because it has a nice rubber grip, and having a good grip on your knife is a very good thing. This one, my sensei in Japan sent this to me as part of my homework box. And it's small, it's nice, it has a nice kind of like textured grip here. And this is really nice for delicate work. He sent this so that we could cut really delicate stencils out of persimmon paper. And that's what that's good for. It's this little blade and it's easy to maneuver. I love this, but it's not really great for cutting, you know, thick pieces of watercolor paper and things like that. My teacher sent this from Japan. I don't know where he got these. This I got in the US at Flax or some other art store. This actually is my favorite for cutting boards and big pieces of paper. It's a box cutter, really. And that's why I like it, because it's tough, it's strong, and it's made for cutting cardboard, which is great because illustration board, thick watercolor paper, right? It's like, now, let's talk about some knife safety. Number one, never point the blade at a person, okay? When I'm cutting, okay, I always cut at an angle, and I always cut at the most comfortable angle on my body. I always move the paper before I cut at some weird, awkward angle, okay? Always. Because you never want to force your hand to do not strong, uncomfortable angles, okay, when you have a blade in your hand. Just move the paper, okay? Now, like I've done things where I'll cut circles. I'll just, you know, draw the circle and I'll cut, you know, but I always move the paper around. When I cut at an angle, I cut it so that if I move the knife straight, the knife ends up next to my body, not towards my body where I would move, you know, hit myself with the end of my knife. When you change blades and you throw these away, always take a piece of thick tape like this, artist tape, masking tape, shipping tape, duct tape, whatever. Take a big old piece of it, take the blade and wrap the whole thing, especially the point. Okay, your garbage collectors will thank you. Whoever takes the trash out at your house will thank you. Animals who root through trash will thank you. Okay, always wrap this stuff up before you throw it away. Let's pretend this is a very thin, very light pencil. Let's pretend this is the wrong side of the paper. Okay, let's say this is your final paper. Number one, you want to clear off your cutting surface so that you're not messing up the final nice surface of your paper. Go ahead and clean it, run your hand over it, make sure there's no random wet spots or anything. Clear all that off, make sure everything is super clean, lay this down, and then let's say we're gonna cut off, you know, 1/8 of an inch off the length. And now you know why it's so much easier to do that with a clear ruler, okay? Because if you had to do this, then you'd have to sit there and mark that, join them, you know, that just takes longer, right? You want to keep this part and throw away that part, right? You always want to put your ruler on the part you want to keep. So you're gonna put your ruler right up against your pencil line, and this part, let's say your hand slips, okay? If your hand slips, it'll slip away like that. Since you're already throwing this away, it doesn't matter. You just try again. But if your hand slips to the part you want to keep, then you've lost a whole sheet of paper, okay? So always cover the part you want to keep with your ruler. you want to hold down the top especially, and as far along the edge as possible. You want to start off your paper. If you start here, it doesn't cut all the way through. You want to start up here. Now, with paper this thin, it doesn't really matter. But if you're cutting anything thicker, like a real board or anything, you want to make sure that your knife is as straight up and down as possible so that you're not cutting like into the side or creating like a bevel or anything. Okay, so make sure, let's do this again. You're holding your knife as straight up and down as possible. Ta-da! Okay, nice, clean cuts. Always retract your blade before you set it down. Mounting paper. I mean, yeah, I guess you could use double stick tape. I never have before, but I don't really see a problem with it. This is spray mount. You know, I've used a bunch of spray mounts before. I don't have a brand preference or anything. Few rules about spray mount. You want air circulating where you are spraying, because this stuff is toxic, okay? You don't want to breathe this stuff in too much, okay? But if you are in a windy area, it can really mess up your project because the mist is going to start flowing in weird ways. So ideally, you know, you would be in a room that's with an open window, but that's not letting a bunch of wind through. And then the second you're done spray mounting, or like take breaks if you're doing a lot of spray mounting, like air out your space, okay? You do not want to be getting all lightheaded, spray mounting, sniffing glue. You do not want that. Again, these cheap illustration boards are good for everything, okay? You want to take your paper and get a scrap piece of paper much bigger, okay? Lay it down, spray to the edge. That's the most important part, right? Spray to the edge with the gross stuff underneath it so that you're protecting your furniture, and then pick it up and mount it down, okay? Always make sure you're protecting your furniture. And then the last thing I want to show you is Studio Tack. This is a dry adhesive. This is literally what it's for little paint and paper chips. It's sheets of adhesive. So this is just paper, okay? It's got nothing on it. And then you peel up the layer, and do you see all the little glue dots? Some people get like super precise and cut out the paper the same size as, like, I don't care. I just stick this on the glue. Make sure that glue is really getting on there. Peel it up. Make sure you have lots of glue on the back. If you don't, just go at it again. That's a good amount. And you just stick that right on there. This adhesive is not particularly strong. It's not for things hanging, a lot of weight balance or any of that, but for little paper chips where it's meant to be laying as flat and smooth as possible, this stuff is fantastic. That's really on there. It doesn't have toxic fumes, so you can use it in a small space. And I bought this, where did I buy this? I bought this at a regular art store. Blick, I think. I hope this video was helpful for you. Please do give me a thumbs up if it was. Also, give me a thumbs up and leave a comment if you want me to do more videos on tips on how to make your design projects and portfolios more professional. So drop me your requests and your comments and your questions below. Share this video with all of your fellow art school students who need some help with some professional presentation tips. And I will see you in the next video.